Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. So you may have recently seen me share on social media that I did a 10-day Shift Your Lens challenge, and it was so much fun. I had such wonderful feedback and engagement with this challenge that I want to share these tools with all of you, my Journey Forward community and audience here on the podcast, because these shifts, I promise you, can make such huge change. And we're not looking to create a big 90-degree shift. We're not looking to create a huge 180-degree shift in our lives. We are simply looking for how to create a 1% shift that can grow over time to put us on a different trajectory from where we have otherwise been stuck, afraid to create change, not knowing how to create change, fearful of creating change. Because here's the thing. I know that growth and change are possible. Even if you can't believe it yet, even if you can't see it, even if you don't know the how, I will hold the space for you that I know it's possible, because when I used to be stuck, not believing it was possible, getting caught up in the, but how do I do this? But what if it's hard? Oh, I don't like to do things differently. I'm comfortable in how I'm doing them, even though the way things aren't actually making me happy. So shifting your lens is an ability to literally look at things a different way so that you can do things differently, so that you can put yourself on a path with greater agency and awareness of what feels good and what doesn't feel good, to get unhooked from patterns and habits and mindsets and ways of showing up in the world that you know you don't want to be. And yet it's familiar. So we tend to stick with what's familiar. We default to our lowest level of habits in the moment of stress and overwhelm. It's hard to access the new habit in the moment when we are activated or overwhelmed or anxious. So we've got to build a muscle. So I am going to share with you 10 ways that you can begin to shift your lens to create small but potent and powerful and impactful change in your life that will literally shift your trajectory and direction, putting you on a course that I believe, when you are in alignment and you are in flow, that is the sweet spot which opportunities, people, experiences come a little bit easier. We're always going to be riding the waves of emotions and curveballs and challenges. And yet with these shifts, you'll have a greater repertoire to draw upon when you most need it. So the very, very first one is about shifting your physiology. Because here's the thing, when we get overwhelmed, when we get emotionally charged, when we get frustrated, when we get triggered, when we get challenged, when things aren't going our way and we fight and resist it, our body and brain are designed to release hormones to help us stay safe. And that activation of our fight, flight, freeze puts our physiology into overdrive. And when that occurs, it's really difficult to make decisions, to think clearly, to stay focused, to pay attention to what's in front of you. And so the very first thing I invite you to consider when you are feeling really stuck, we got to shift our physiology. We've got to quiet down the emotional brain so that all of our tools can go back online. Because when that emotional brain takes over, it's literally like all access to our resources. It's like the Wi-Fi goes out. And one of the best ways to get the Wi-Fi of our resources back online is to simply breathe. When we can pause and take a deep breath, it will shift our physiology. It quiets down our emotional alarm. It activates the rest and digest part of our brain, in which our whole body is going to say, oh, okay, I'm no longer in a space of threat to my safety or security. I can exhale now. I can breathe. And now I can move forward, making a clear choice, a decision, stay focused, pay more attention, learn something, listen better, communicate more effectively. It's kind of like this. You'll hear throughout this episode that I love to give visuals. To me, visuals, I'm a visual learner. So if I can see it in my mind, I have a greater ability to create the change in my life. So imagine a snow globe that has been shaken up and all the glitter is swirling around. That's how we feel when we're activated. When our fight, flight, freeze has been turned on through some real or perceived threat, you feel it in your body. When we notice this, we have a choice to let all the glitter in our snow globe settle. That is calming down your nervous system. You just got to breathe. When you pause and breathe, all of the glitter in the snow globe begins to settle. When we don't pause and breathe, when we otherwise complain, when we otherwise ruminate, when we otherwise talk ad nauseum about all the things that are wrong, it's literally like we're shaking our own snow globe and asking, why isn't the glitter settling? We activate ourselves even worse. So when we have awareness that that's what's happening, no judgment, just simply notice and allow yourself to allow your emotions, your thoughts, your physiology begin to settle. So take a minute and just breathe is the best way for your physiology to get there. Okay. You may have heard me talk about some of these in the past, but I'm just happy to have them all in one place for you as a really great resource. The second one of how you can shift your lens of doing something different is recognizing how long you're holding on to something that is not serving you without recognizing you have a choice. So I invite you, if you have something in front of you, to actually do this, experience what I'm talking about. Or if not, you can just imagine it in your mind. But if you have like a water bottle or a cup in front of you, I invite you to hold it up and ask yourself how much you think it weighs. Maybe it's a half a pound. If it's a full big water bottle, maybe it's a pound. But it's probably not all that heavy. But if I were to say to you, you're going to have to hold this cup up for the remainder of this podcast episode, do you think it would be heavy then? Yeah, it would absolutely start getting heavy. What if I said you have to hold it for the next 3 hours or even the next 24 hours? Would that cup begin to feel heavy? It absolutely would. But that's the thing. We go through life holding on to these things, not recognizing we have a choice in what to do with the cup. So I invite you to take this cup that you're holding and set it down in front of you. It's still there. You've simply shifted your relationship to it. And in that shift, in the space that you've created, you have freedom of deciding, oh, look at this cup. The longer I held on to it, the heavier it was, and that didn't feel really good. So what could I do differently? Well, now that I've put it down and I've created this space, I actually can decide, how do I want to respond versus react to it? Because we hold stuff in our lives that cause us more suffering. And the whole goal here is to feel good, not to feel bad. So when we can find ways to reduce our suffering, we feel good. So the shift here is to put down the cup. Now, by putting it down, you are not denying, resisting, or ignoring it. You're simply shifting your relationship to it so that it's not so heavy to carry, so that you can reduce your own suffering, giving yourself greater agency in how to decide how to respond. Okay, on to the third shift. This is all about recognizing where you have options and how you can create a new path forward despite the very well-established pathway that you've always gone down. So this is about shifting your pathways, shifting your options. So again, another visual. I invite you to imagine in your mind's eye that you are approaching a snowy field. and you want to get across. And there's a well-established pathway across the snow. And it's so well-established that the snow embankments on either side are like 10 feet high. But the problem is when you walk down that path, you don't like how you feel. And when you get to the other side, it's not really where you want to be. So I invite you to imagine starting a new path across the snow. At first, it's really hard. It's going to be wet and sloshy and cold. It's going to be uncomfortable. And you're going to be like, oh, why am I doing this when I have a well-established path over there? Well, it's because you're recognizing that walking down the old path is out of alignment with how you want to feel. And if you want to be in alignment to feel good, facing in the direction of your desires, then you create a new path. And every time you approach the snowy field, if you choose the new path, over time, every time you make that new choice, it becomes well established. And guess what? The other one's going to snow over. So not only are you creating new pathways to make choices, to move forward, to get unhooked from habitual patterns that no longer serve you, but that is literally what's happening in your brain as you rewire new habits and patterns. And that's simply called neuroplasticity, which didn't always used to be believed to be the case. It used to be believed that your brain can't change. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. And that simply isn't true. So imagine the snowy field, that you always have a new option other than going down the path you've always gone down. It's shifting your pathways to keep you in alignment to where you want to go and how to feel good along the way. I hope these are resonating so far. I'd love to hear feedback on this from you guys. Okay. Another shift you can make is to shift the way you look at a situation. And this literally is like, imagine wearing a pair of glasses. And you've been in a habit of wearing a pair of glasses that have dark lenses. And you're seeing everything through that dark shade. It's shifting your perception from what's really in front of you. And you get so convicted in that this is the only way to look at a situation that you don't even consider, oh, how could I shift into another pair of glasses? What would it look like if I shifted into a rose-colored pair of lenses or a light blue pair of lenses? Whatever pair of lenses you choose to look at, you are giving yourself the opportunity to shift the way you see a situation. Because when we become so narrow-minded and narrow-focused in our viewpoint, it prevents us from being fully present, because we're likely stuck on some old narrative from the past that supports this viewpoint. And this can get in the way of relationships. This can get in the way of communication. This can get in the way of options for ways that you want to move through your life. So I invite you to look for opportunities in which you can literally shift the lens in how you see a situation. How might you open up with more curiosity, with compassion, to see if there's another door into the same room of how you're looking at it? All right, on to shift number 5. This is shifting your thought patterns. So we all have a train of thoughts. And I like to think of our train of thoughts as literally a train pulling into a station. Now, without awareness, we literally jump on board with every thought that comes into our mind. So here's the shift. I invite you to imagine your feet firmly planted, standing on a train platform. And whenever I envision this, I think of the train platforms near the city I live, in which there's actually a train platform in the middle of the freeway. And so there's like all this chaos and 6 lanes of cars in each direction going in my periphery. And then I'm at the train, standing at the train station, standing on the train platform. And without awareness, any car that pulls into the train station, I'm just going to jump on board. And off in the distance, that train is going to go without me even having agency to say, is this the right train I'm supposed to be on? Do I even want to be on this train? Did I even look to see what direction it's heading? Or did I simply jump on board this train because it's what showed up? That's what we do with our thoughts. We often jump on board with whatever thought comes into our mind, and it takes us off into the distance, often abandoning our own self from where we want to be and how we want to show up. So the shift is to consciously choose which car of the train you're going to jump on board with. And in the meantime, keep your feet firmly planted on that platform and only choose to step forward on the thought that serves you best. This one is huge. I could spend, and I'm sure I have in previous episodes, an entire hour, not even just 1 hour, multiple hours talking about the pattern of how we get hooked into our thoughts, and it does not serve us. So this visual, this shift of not jumping on board with every thought that comes into your mind is a practice, and it's a very powerful one. Okay, shift number 6. This is a little bit like the fourth one and how we're shifting our vantage point by looking through a situation and through a new lens. But this is a very specific example that I'm going to call be the weatherman. This comes from an experience in which I was working with a young girl many years ago, and she had a lot of anxiety. And she described her anxiety as being in the middle of a tornado. And it was such a beautiful description because, again, I love visuals. And just like the cup you were holding a moment ago, I'm not here to deny or dismiss or ignore the tornado that you're experiencing, but we want to change our relationship to it. Because when we're in the middle of a tornado, we have no power. So the shift is to become the weatherman and to commentate on the tornado. What would it look or sound like for you to observe it, create some space? When you create the space to observe, to be the commentator on what's arising, and you remove yourself from being in the center of it, you begin to realize where you have choice. So this shift is shifting your vantage point, shifting your relationship to whatever it is that's arising, creating space, and within that space lies your freedom. When you can respond and not react and get outside of habitual patterns of reactivity, it's very powerful. And in fact, getting out of a cycle of reactivity is at the very, very core of what I teach all my clients. I have a core framework called the cycle of reactivity, in which we engage in repetitive cyclical patterns that continue to keep us stuck. And the more we stay focused on where we're stuck, the harder it is to see where we want to go. So I'll talk more about that in another episode. But when we can shift our relationship to how we're managing whatever is arising that's causing us distress, we have the freedom to get out of the distress. All right, shift number 7 is to be mindful of the language in which you're speaking. When we can shift into different language, we change our experience. One of my favorite examples of this is when my kids were little, I used to tell them, as long as you say you can't, you've decided you won't. They made a decision they couldn't do something, which prevented them from even being open to trying. So when we can shift the language that we speak in our own minds, when we can shift the language that our inner critic usually takes over with, when we can shift our language and how we communicate to others, everything changes. Communication patterns are fundamental to creating new patterns in our relationships, but our language, we become very fixed. And as long as our language is fixed, we continue to reoccur with the same things, keeping us where we are, preventing us from where we want to be. Because at the root of all of this, there's somewhere in your life you'd like to be that you just can't get to yet. So these shifts are invitations to step you closer to where you want to be. So notice the language in which you're speaking. Again, in your own mind. Is it a fixed or open mindset? Is it in support of your desires? Is it compassionate? Is it curious? Notice, pay attention. Shift number 8 is about shifting into different interpretations of situations and especially other people. This is one of my favorite things to invite my clients to do, which is if someone else is acting in an unkind way towards them, we tend to over-personalize almost everything. And yes, sometimes it may be personal, and we've got to have self-awareness of our own role in any conflict that's arising. But sometimes because we over-personalize things, we fail to get curious around what might be going on for this other person that is allowing them to show up in the way in which they are. That may have nothing to do with me. But if I can shift it to a different interpretation, that this isn't against me, but maybe something that is going on with them that they may not even really have awareness around. How might I respond differently And how might I depersonalize the situation? All of which would give me greater ability to respond and not react, not be so defensive, not get so caught up in all the reactivity that prevents us from closeness and intimacy that we're seeking. So being open to looking at what is underneath the motivating behaviors that someone is showing. Getting curious. There is always an emotion that's driving a behavior, and we tend to over-focus on the behaviors. And I'm inviting you to get curious on the emotions that are leading to those behaviors. When you can be open to seeing things from another perspective or have a different interpretation, you gain freedom. Okay, this is pretty simple one. Don't have to say too much about it, but it's about shifting your mindset. Notice if you have a fixed or an open mindset. And if you're noticing your mindset is fixed and closed, the opportunity for you to create any change is going to be very difficult. One of my favorite examples of mindset and the power of our mindset is a study that was done in the early 90s with overweight hotel maids. They were divided into two groups, and they were told to not change anything in their diet or exercise. However, the test group was told that everything that these women did for their job every day was actually healthy for them. When they vacuumed, when they changed the sheets, when they pushed the cart down the aisle, when they dusted, all of that burned calories. And there was a poster in their break room telling them how many calories were burned for each task that they performed as part of their daily work routine. Well, lo and behold, at the end of the study, those who believed that what they were doing was good for them actually lost weight and body fat, when in fact, nothing else in their health routine changed. Think about that. How might you shift into different ways if you believe something was possible? What might you be able to create or manifest or produce by simply believing in the possibility of it? Because that is the power of our minds. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So look for where you can shift your mindset. All right, this last shift is about shifting your focus. And I've shared this story before, and I'm not going to go into great depth with it here, but I had a single most life-changing experience in which a time when I was on a retreat almost 10 years ago, I was told that I had to break a board. It was a martial arts exercise. There was 2 cement blocks with a plastic interlocking board across the top and a purple meditation cushion underneath. My very first thought when I was told I had to break a board was, I can't fucking do that. Well, look at that. The language was pretty fixed. My mindset was pretty fixed because some of the previous shifts I already just talked about. After given the instruction, there were 3 different boards. One that was the weight of an equivalent piece of real wood, if you were to do an actual martial arts breaking of a board, a lighter and a heavier one. We were told we got one chance and had to pick which board we wanted to break. I chose the middle one because I don't like taking the easy way out on anything. But there was this purple meditation cushion under the board. And Dan Millman, who led the retreat, said, what's the goal here? And we all said, well, duh, you just told us the goal is to break the board. He said, no, the goal is to actually hit the cushion. The board is simply in your way. The board represents your obstacles, and the cushion represents your dreams and your goals and your desires. The board is the roadblocks preventing you from getting you to where you want to be. So it's my turn to go. I'm full of self-doubt. I'm telling myself I can't do this. I get up there in front of 65 people. I raise up my hand. I come down. All of my energy, focus, and attention was on the board. And when I hit the board, it didn't break. And I immediately said to myself, see, told myself I couldn't do it. And I was right. And I was full of so much shame and embarrassment because I was one of 6 people out of 65 who did not break the board. After everyone went, he asked us to raise our hand who didn't break it. And I sheepishly raised my hand. And I got a chance to do it again. But then I had the choice. Was I going to do the same one or was I going to do the easier one? Well, I don't take the easy way out. So I chose the same one. And I got up there again. And Dan Millman is guiding me through this. Something in me shifted. I recognized that all of my entire energy, focus, gaze, and attention was focused on the board. But this time, I looked past the board at the cushion and I focused all of my energy, my gaze, my focus, and my attention on that purple meditation cushion. And I took a deep breath and I raised up my hand and I broke through that board and I hit that cushion and I let out a whopping scream in joy. And I never once have looked back. Never again could I tell myself that I couldn't do something because I had an obstacle in my way. Wherever you focus your attention on, that's where you're going to stay stuck. So I invite you to focus your attention on your desires. I'd invite you to focus your attention on your goals and your dreams. If you stay focused on the obstacles, on the roadblocks, that's where you're going to stay. The choice is up to you. So I hope that you found all of these shifts intriguing, inviting, helpful, and these are practices. It's never going to be a one and done. This is an ongoing practice to create the shifts in your life to get you in alignment, facing in the direction of your desires, so you can be living in full alignment, in authenticity, in your agency, in fulfillment. That's a pretty sweet spot to be. So if this episode spoke to you, I would love a rating, a review, a share. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I invite you to continue to shift your lens to get yourself unstuck from the habits, the patterns, the mindsets, the reactivities that are preventing you from getting to where you want to be. All right, everyone, take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.